Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. I just want to be able to have access to share my screen if I can. Well, thank you again for allowing me to present to you all today. Let's see, get this. If we have problems with the screen, I can just talk. Is that okay? Yeah? Let's see. No, it won't let me share. Okay. So today we're talking about data privacy fundamentals and the challenges of data analytics and AI. So first of all, again, thank you for having me as part of this conference. I'm really thrilled that Dr. Miti reached out to me and asked me to do this. So it's pretty fun for me to be able to actually be able to talk with you all about these challenges. So I won't introduce myself since you guys have already done that. The challenges that present themselves in AI and data analytics in terms of privacy have to do with a couple of different things. So one is the growth of people using the internet, the growth of individuals who are sharing their personal data on the internet with companies and other organizations to be able to transact business of some sort, whether that be personal, like working with the government for some type of benefit, or consuming something. So recent statistic as of January 2021, there are 4.66 billion people on the global internet, and that number is growing quite a lot. So the last time I did this statistic in 2019, I think the number was like 3.1 billion. So a lot of more people have gotten on the internet, and a lot more will continue. Let's see. The worldwide data privacy regulations have increased exponentially, and they will continue to increase over the years. So as we see with data privacy regulations like the GDPR, it has become even more challenging for people who are dealing with data of individuals to really manage or navigate how data privacy laws are being enacted around the world, and how that actually impacts. Oh, I can share my screen now. Okay. All right. Hopefully you can see my screen. All right. Okay. So basically, worldwide data privacy regulations, because they're increasing, people, especially in the data world, data folks like me, we're very concerned about how we need to handle data responsibly and be able to still create tools and also implement tools that are forward thinking and really be able to help people. As we know, AI is being implemented quite a lot in a lot of different and almost any type of industry that you could think of, and that trend will only increase in the future. So being able to understand how to either build products that can, be revolutionary and still protect the rights of individuals is very important. All right. So the three big challenges that I see towards data analytics and AI are privacy by design, transparency, and trust. So privacy by design is not a new concept, but it's something that's gotten a lot more attention as it was implemented in GDPR, and it was quite revolutionary at the time in terms of being able to implement that, because regulations tend to be something that are enacted after some harm has occurred. So to put privacy by design in the GDPR is interesting because it's a forward-looking, not a backwards-looking type of thing. So privacy by design in this concept, and we're seeing this trickle down into other laws in different nations and countries. So definitely at the state level in the US, there are legislations that have been passed and are continuing to be passed that really call for people who are building products or even implementing them to really think about the design of stuff. So privacy, because it's a right of a human or a consumer, when you're building tools or you're thinking about creating things that touch customer data, is very important to understand that it's extremely hard to do it after the fact. So it can't be something that's really tacked on it at the end. So if you're developing this really great product and then at the end you had not thought about privacy, you may either have a barrier to adoption, not be able to sell the product, have some type of pushback. And we actually saw an example of this in England, where the National Health Service had built a contact tracing app, but they sort of hurriedly built this app because they wanted people to use it. And after the fact, they did an assessment of it and found that it didn't meet the privacy regulations that were in place in the EU, because of Brexit. At first they were under the GDPR, but now they're under their own law, which is the UK Data Privacy Act. So they found that app did not comply with those laws, so they really could not use it. So they had to sort of go back and kind of redo or rethink the way that they design the app. So my wish for people who are designing tools that touch customer data, it's very important to really look at privacy, think about it first. Obviously, I think another challenge that people who are creating tools and implementing tools have is that you want the tool to be able to work for almost any type of customer. So you may put in a lot of different features that, say it may be illegal in one place but not in another place. So an example of this would be, I think it was Sony, I can't remember what company, but there was a company that made like a robot dog, and because this robot dog had a feature where it could record people's conversations, it was something that the manufacturer decided that they could not sell in the state of Illinois. So the state of Illinois has the strongest actually biometric law in the world right now. So it's very concerning because it has a private right of action, meaning that an individual can sue. It's currently being interpreted as it has a fine from $1,000 to $5,000 per data capture. That's how it's being interpreted, meaning that every time someone's biometric information is captured, it could be, someone could be charged this $1,000 or up to $5,000 per incident fine. So that is an example of something that you don't want to happen. So you want to be able to build a product that has the most capability to be used or utilized almost anywhere, but then you also have to be cognizant of, for example, being able to have consumers or people who implement to be able to turn on and off or decide what types of features that they want to use for those products. So this is going to be something that's going to be ongoing that people will have to consider, and that's why privacy by design is very important. The second thing is transparency. So we're seeing a lot in the news. I don't know if anyone has seen Dr. Joy's documentary on Netflix called Coded Bias, but a lot of Joy's work in this documentary is about bias in terms of being able to do things like recognize the face of a darker skinned person within AI or algorithms. So she developed the algorithmic Justice League, and if you haven't seen the film already, I highly recommend that you see it because it really explains how she got into this, or why she's doing this, which is very important. So the issue there, and we're seeing it in a lot of different places. So we're seeing situations where that could be harmful to individuals. So we're seeing places where, let's say, Courts are using technologies to try to decide how they sentence people. So being able to find bias and figure that out in systems is very important. There was a recent situation that the New England Journal of Medicine reported on. I think they did a study last year in the U.S. of 10,000 patients, and this had to do like a pulse oximeter device, which is kind of it looks like a clip that you put on your finger, like if you go to the emergency room, and it's supposed to be able to tell your oxygen level. And it was found that this device had 3 times the error rate on people of color than people with lighter skin for some reason. And one of the doctors who evaluated the stuff said that it would give a result that was more positive than was actually true for African American or people with darker skin, which meant the readings at times will be the difference between someone being admitted to the hospital or sent home. So, those are the types of things that people are looking at when they're looking at AI and thinking about like transparency and ethics. They want to see what the algorithms are doing, or they want to have more visibility so that we can stop or catch those types of issues, because as you can see, it can cause tremendous harm to individuals if we don't get this right. Another thing that I want to bring up about AI and algorithms, I know people talk about it a lot, but I don't think anyone that I know feels that people who design these systems are doing so with nefarious intent, but I think because these systems, they are built in ways and being implemented in ways that could cause harm to individuals. We still need to be cognizant of that and be open to feedback from people who can help train those systems and help to try to implement them in a way that minimizes the harm to individuals. And then trust. So trust is important because especially you're in a situation right now where customers are becoming a lot more savvy about their use of data, and because of things like data breach and stuff like that, people are starting to be more savvy and make choices about how they share their data. So I read a statistic from FIDO.org, which is the Fast ID Online initiative, that they said the average person has about 90 usernames and passwords to stuff. So to me, that is not a sustainable thing. So not everyone is going to be able to manage their privacy or be able to find out, what all these algorithms or how their data is being used. So it's going to be a situation where people will share less. They'll share more data with companies they trust, and they'll share less with companies that they don't trust or companies that they don't know. So that's a huge shift that's happening right now, and I think part of that is because of the privacy push with Apple with their iOS 14 update, where they're trying to give consumers more transparency or more visibility into what is happening with their data so they can make informed choices, and that definitely goes back to trust. So trust, is not an amorphous way to think about data, because trust can help people decide whether they want to use your product or not. So it's not just even though I think we have ethical obligations to try to get this right, there is a barrier that companies will have to being able to sell their product or even be profitable if they can't show consumers or people they're using their data that they're being a good steward. So let's see. And feel free to jump in if you have questions. All right, so the thing that I like to talk to companies about when we're, especially folks that are involved in kind of the design and implementation of any type of technology that touches individuals. The thing that I say is, instead of getting flustered by all the different regulations that are coming out, what I've found over the years, all regulations have some or all of these five themes that I'm going to talk about. So being able to keep these five themes in sight when you're trying to develop or create or implement any type of data analytics or AI will help you greatly. So I think these are things that I think have helped me in the past and have helped a lot of people that I've worked with to be able to navigate the best way to protect or acknowledge the rights of individuals, and also be able to build and implement tools that will, be trustworthy for consumers and will sort of minimize barriers to adoption, whether that be adoption of customers, adoption in different markets, things like that. Okay. So the first one is the privacy rights of individuals. So there are three buckets I call of privacy rights. So one is the privacy right where privacy is a fundamental human right. So we see this in Europe where a lot of times people confuse the General Data Protection Regulation, which is the GDPR, with the privacy law. So it really is a protection law, not really a privacy law, because in Europe, in the EU, in the 1950s, I think it was 1953, they put or codified in their constitution that privacy was a fundamental human right. So a lot of this came to pass because of the abuses that happened based on Nazi Germany, and Europe's response to that is that they wanted people to have privacy as a fundamental human right. So for well over 50 years, the EU has been codifying and building on that, and that's how they came up with eventually the GDPR, which is very strong. So that law really is to protect the privacy right that they have. So the second bucket is privacy as a right by data category and consumer transaction. So that, when we think of privacy right as categories, that's mostly what we have in the US on a federal level. So we have privacy regulations that cover health, like HIPAA, even though HIPAA is not a privacy law. HIPAA is a law about data portability, but it has a huge privacy section because in order to change or move data around, you have to protect it in that way. So it does have a very stringent privacy component to it. So a lot of people talk about it as a privacy law. Then we have like Gramm-Leach-Bliley, which is a law about finance. We have laws about like consumer credit. We also have federal laws about children online. So those are kind of categories of privacy or data privacy regulations that we have in the US. Those are at the federal level. But the majority of the laws we see being passed now in the US are at a state level, and they tend to focus on consumer rights. So your rights to privacy when you're transacting business of some sort. So it's very different from privacy as a human right like they have in the EU, which means that that right lives with the person from cradle to grave, and it travels with their data, where our rights are kind of circumstantial in a way in the US. So it isn't really a human right, except for like the Fourth Amendment, which is about unreasonable search and seizure. And even that is limited to things that are in your physical surroundings or possession. So there's a thing called the third party doctrine in the US that says that the data or information is held by a third party, So I use an example as a cloud provider doesn't have the same level of protection than something that's in your physical environment. And that's just sort of a disconnect with the law and actually how technology works, which hopefully we can work through that. And then we have privacy as a governmental right, which kind of supersedes individual rights. So a lot of times people think about this like in government regimes like China, where the government has so much more right than the individual over some of their personal data. But then also, I think because of COVID, we're seeing a lot of governments taking more rights from individuals because of the emergency of, the national or international health crisis, which is COVID. So one example of that would be, we're seeing some places are mandating that people have vaccines, or some locations are creating things like health passports. So, you may have to have a vaccine, you may have to have something digitally to be able to show that you're okay to travel, that you're okay to go to work, and things like that. So in the US, because a lot of that happens at the state level, it may be different from state to state, but this is a situation where your health information would not have otherwise been shared outside of kind of a medical setting, except that it's a public health issue. So those are kind of the three ways that I think about privacy rights. All right, the second theme here is the purpose of data processing. So when I say data processing, I mean anything that you do with data. So I'm not necessarily talking about kind of a technical process. I'm talking about just your need to handle data in any way, whether that be seeing the data, touching it, working with it in any type of way. So the biggest purposes that we see are data used to provide goods and services. So whether that be paid or free services, that's especially when people are on the internet, that's typically the way that they're interacting with businesses or with products, where they're sharing their data. Data in the normal course of business, so kind of management or employment, which is kind of a general purpose. Providing services or seek information from individuals. So maybe a government, let's say someone is trying to sign up for a government program or something, they have to give information over. Also, there's a lot of data collection which is controversial in law enforcement, where obviously law enforcement captures data of criminal activity, but now we're seeing law enforcement utilizing databases of just regular consumers that may not have committed any crimes whatsoever. Things like Clearview AI, where data may have been scraped from other places on the internet, and it's compiled together with maybe information that other people don't know that's compiled about them, and put into databases that are being used to search for people. So for me, my thought about that is, if you want to find a needle in a haystack, you shouldn't create bigger haystacks. So that's just my thought about that. But purpose is very important, and it's something that we're seeing that's coming up in almost every privacy regulation that I can think of, where they're trying to frame the discussion to say, if you can't tie your data collection to a purpose, and then the EU, they call that a legal basis. So you have to have a legal basis in the EU to process data. Consent of the individual is a legal basis as well, but it's one that most companies, except people like Apple, don't want to do. So they want to be able to do mass data collection without actually having to ask the person. Purpose is also very important, because we're seeing features in privacy laws where they are saying, if you transfer, let's say you have a customer, you have data of an individual that gave it to you, and then you want to transfer it to a third party, there are many of these laws have some type of stop there or check at that point where you either have to get consent, you either can't transfer to a third party, you have to get consent from the individual to transfer to a third party, or you need some other, again, another good reason that's legal, like performance of contract, to be able to transfer that data. This is a big issue on the internet right now as it relates to data brokers, because a lot of data brokers, people don't know who they are or what they're doing, and there's a lot of data or information to be had or to be collected, but we're still working through that, different areas of the world. Obviously, in the US is a big open issue right now. All right, accountability. So accountability for data processing is really key. So being able to track data throughout a process, which I don't think that's a problem with analytics or AI. Assessing how the technology is managing and disseminating the data. I think that goes back to being able to see not only the purpose, but is the algorithm or are the data analytics doing what you expect it to do or what you want it to do with the data, and are the results what you expect or not? And then transparency for handling data of individuals. So accountability is a really, really hot issue in AI and data analytics, and it's something that's very hotly debated from people. So a lot of people say, I've heard people who design systems say, I create the algorithm, I create the software, and then people decide who uses it, so that I'm not accountable for how people use it. And I think, and then the people who use it say, well, I don't know what the algorithm is doing. So I don't know, I'm just implementing this thing, and I don't, I think the person who makes the application needs to be able to tell me. So I think accountability, and we're seeing this even, I keep pointing to the EU because they're a lot further ahead in thinking about and creating, process, procedure, regulation, and directives around this. They're creating a framework for the use of artificial intelligence and AI and data analytics in the EU. And one of the big things that they are trying to put together is who has responsibility. So I think the responsibility is shared at all levels in terms of people who are creating and developing these types of tools or using this type of data, and also the people who are utilizing it. And then, of course, I think in terms of individuals, it has to be very clear about how their data is being used and why. And then there's also a huge debate about anonymization. So anonymization is a huge issue because laws that call for data to be anonymized in some way may be prescriptive in a way that's not feasible, or it doesn't really connect with technology. So when I say that, I mean data, companies have a lot of data about individuals, and even if you anonymize it, it may be easily people may be easily re-identified technologically, but some of the laws, just to meet the legal standard of anonymization, may not be sufficient in terms of protecting the identity of an individual. So that is a debate that's still going on right now. All right. Okay, for the security of the data. So security, as we know, is a hot thing because of a lot of the data breaches and things that people read in the news. People are concerned about their data being hacked or being, taken by a cyber criminal. And then especially because we're dealing now with so much more sensitive data. So when we think about the use of biometrics, whether that be, retina scan, gait recognition, those types of things, people are wondering how can companies that develop these products or implement them, what can they do to better safeguard or protect the data there? One thing that I completely recommend to people is limiting data on a need-to-know basis. A lot of the lawsuits that are coming out of the state of California as a result of the CCPA, which is the Consumer Privacy Act in California. A lot of those cases that have been filed since the CCPA went into effect are either about data breach or unauthorized access. So if you have data that you are working with and it is being accessed by people who should not, or don't need to have access to it, if you can secure that data in that way, that will minimize your risk when you're handling the data, especially if there's a data breach. Also, securing data is more of a cybersecurity thing as opposed to a privacy thing. So I like to say that privacy and cybersecurity have a symbiotic relationship because, cybersecurity helps privacy, but privacy, again, these are rights of individuals. So I think it's a little bit different. Also, limiting data collection to what's important. This may be different, and I've had a lot of people who had a difference of opinion about this, especially in industries like people who do data science and data analytics. Some of the tools are made to be able to crunch a lot of data and be able to get different insights from it. So being able to have more data or a lot of data may make some of those tools run better. But I think being able to figure out or be more targeted in how data is collected, if it is not vitally important, I think that goes back to data purpose again. So I think, people who are developing and working on tools that do this type of data, have these data touches, should think about those types of things. All right, data retention. So data retention is a big issue. One issue is, and this again is coming up as a result of privacy legislation, which is a lot of these regulations have parts in it that say that if an individual contacts a company that has their data, they have to, give them, reply back to them with information about the data that's stored about them, possibly correct it depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, and then delete it if needed. So retention schedules that are tied to the purpose of data and the end of data use, I think is really important. So a lot of the data breaches that we're seeing, sometimes they tend to be data that may no longer have super high use within the organization, but there may not have been a plan to delete or remove that data from the environment. So it creates, it's a double-edged sword. So the data, a lot of the data, especially when I'm talking about legacy data that companies have, that data may have low business value because it's so old, but it has a super high risk if it is breached, because then if it has that data has identifiable information of individuals, it may increase the fines that a company may have to, and also increase the amount of money they have to spend to be able to figure out what's in that particular data set and what individuals are impacted, as well as what are the state and federal rules about reporting a breach and things like that. So data retention is really important in terms of figuring out, do you need this data? Why are you keeping it? Why do you have it? Those are all good questions to ask. If data is no longer has any use, it's highly recommended that data be deleted or removed in some way, because that will lower the cybersecurity or data breach risk if if you're not retaining stuff that you don't need. So a lot of that is really working with the business or working with the companies to figure out what makes the most sense to do, and then how your application or how your implementation is going to work on that. So that, to me, what I've seen in my career, I've seen, maybe people who are developing tools or working closely with the people who are implementing them to figure out what makes the most sense. So, an example of this, I was working with a company that's implementing identity management stuff as it relates to travel. So, like people getting, some airlines are testing people before they get on planes, and being able to do that transaction in a way that, like let's say they have a smartphone, it may give them like a green thumbs up or something to say they can get on the plane or not. But being able to go through that process, part of it is what is the capability of the tool, and then how can the user of the tool be able to tweak it to their use. So let's say, for instance, a particular country says that certain biometric data needs to be deleted within X number of, days or months or something like that. You want to be able to have a feature where where it's clear to the person how that application can work, and then also lets them be able to make it customizable in a way. I don't know if that's the right word, but they should be able to have the ability to choose what those time periods are. So being able to have features to let people choose how that data is being retained or not is very important, because I think that what we found is that opens up the capability for a lot of these tools to be sold in a lot of different jurisdictions, but then it's incumbent upon the company that's implementing it to really tweak those settings to be able to make it legal for their location. All right. That was a little bit short. I wanted to save time for questions if you had any. You have any questions? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think the best way that I've seen people try to be proactive about it is think about what you want to have at the end. So think about the customer, the types of customers you want to have at the end. Think about the type of reach that you want to have for your product in the end. Because I think, I've seen people get really excited about stuff that they're doing, and then let's say a tool, you have a tool and it has like these 6 cool things that it does, but if let's say, for instance, four of the 6 things are legal in a particular jurisdiction and 2 of them aren't. So what you don't want to do is combine those things together where they can't, like let's say if you don't use the other 2, the other 4 won't work or something like that. So I think being able to have features designed in a way that can be tweaked or turned on and off or adjusted in some way, especially as it relates to the collection of biometrics especially. So I'll give you an example. So I was working with a company. They create a tool that can do thermal checks of someone. So you stand in front of the device, it can tell whether you have a temperature. It has a capability to do facial recognition. You could tie it to a database and it could do that. And then it also had a feature where it could do UV sanitation of different places or different areas. So that was a situation where you can't really do all three. I mean, I guess technologically the tool could do all three, but like, let's say if someone walked up to the device and they got their temperature taken, that may be okay, right? But then let's say facial recognition. What are you searching? You know what I mean? Are you searching a criminal database for this person or something? Is that even legal where you are? And then you need someone's consent to zap someone with a UV, right? You just can't just walk up to someone that's like, oh my God, I'll press this button, I'm gonna be zapped. So, thinking about those types of things or those types of uses and being able to have people say, okay, well, I want the thermal thing, but I don't want to zap people when they walk up to this machine. You have to be able to have that be different so that you can, it will make you be able to sell it. Like maybe someone wants that, to be zapped or something, but trying to bundle it together in a way that a person doesn't have a choice in how it's used, I think can be problematic, and it could cause barriers to you being able to sell your product. Yeah, sure. So, what you're talking about really is, to me, it goes in the realm of differential privacy, where you may not be releasing information about individuals, but it may be anonymized in a way almost statistically, so that you can be able to convey the information without belying the identity of individuals. So I think that type of data collection and that type of statistics, those are very important, because a lot of times companies or organizations or government, they're making decisions about what they want to do in the future as a result of that. But you also don't necessarily need to show who the individual is. So I think that there's a way to be able to supply that information in ways that are anonymous or anonymized, maybe even statistically, that will make it better. So the government has been doing this for a long time. So think about like the census. So when they give out information about the census, they're not telling who did what. They're just saying, oh, well, this group, lives in this place and they do different things. So I think, even if organizations are collecting more personal data about individuals, I think they need to be more circumspect about how that data is disseminated and how it's stored in the future. So if you don't think that information is needed, it may not be needed. It may not be important to be able to have the person's identity or their race or whatever. It may or may not be important. But I think anonymization is an issue that a lot of companies need to really think about, because if you can anonymize data to a certain point and sort of detach it from the identity of an individual, that data sort of flies under the radar of privacy laws. So the challenge again is being able to anonymize it to a point where it's still useful, but it can't be re-identified, which is another issue you have to think about. Yeah, that's a great question. Hello, Michi. let's see. Well, it plays into our rights in a couple of different ways. So one is has to do with consent. So consent, there is almost no limit to what you can consent to. Okay, so I tell people, it's illegal to sell your organs, but that's about it. So you can consent to almost anything. So when you look at the terms and conditions, they may have really crazy things in it, and they may, especially a free service. So a free service, it's hard to quantify, right, what the value is that you're getting and what the value that you're giving. So a lot of times that data exchange is asymmetrical, so it's uneven. So let's say Facebook, just pick on them, but let's say Facebook gets, Facebook is free, right, but they get $2,000 worth of value from you every year because they sell your data. So that's sort of uneven, I would say, because what you're doing on Facebook is like looking at cat videos and stuff like that. I don't know, but you may say, well, if it was a paid service, the flip side of that is like, would you pay $1,000 or $2,000 a year for Facebook? And you probably say no, because I don't think it's worth it. So being able to have a free service, it makes that data exchange asymmetrical. But I think it's really important for people, if you can, a lot of times they make you they try to give you those 80-page things because they know no one wants to read it, but I would definitely say, maybe sign up for less things, but definitely read those terms and conditions to see if this is something you really want to do. And some people say it's okay. They're like, I'm willing to trade, this because it has a really good benefit for me. So, it just depends on the situation. I think, they can put all types of stuff in those agreements, and you really should read them, especially for high value data that you're using a service for. Well, a lot of different people offer training. I do training too. It depends on sort of what you want. I think there are some tools, there are some online things that you can go to that'll say, well, we'll do like a basic training for you. There are people you can go to that will do like more of a detailed training, so something's more customized for your industry or the type of things that you're doing. But I highly recommend, even as a start, go look out for free resources. I think LinkedIn has a couple of little basic data privacy courses that you can do for free, definitely. But some people in some industries need a little bit more. I often work with people at all different levels, so sometimes I'm doing stuff for developers, so I have to target for that, or board of directors and stuff like that. So I think there's a decent amount of kind of free or nominally expensive, not very expensive, basic training you can get on privacy. But to me, I almost see it like cyber security training. So where that's something you should probably be doing on a regular basis, like every year at least, if not more, because, from a privacy perspective, the regulations are changing, and maybe that may change depending on the location you're in, how you're doing business. So a lot of this has to do with operating and how you operate your business. So I try to tell people, I feel like the privacy industry, people who do it for a living, a lot of times they're overly focused on the law part and not as focused on operations. And the problem there is when you see companies getting fined for privacy stuff, it's for operations. It's not for illegal stuff. It's not like they didn't know what the law was. They didn't know how to change the way that they do business so that they can comply with the law. That was a good question. Oh, that's a great question. So, wow. Okay, so the thing that you have to realize about consumer devices is that, and I tell people this all the time, especially as it relates to like health and biometric information. So people think, especially in the US, that any information about your health is protected by HIPAA, and that is not true. So your health, let's say you have a Fitbit. So a Fitbit you bought off the internet, off of Amazon or something, and you know, it checks your pulse and does all this other type of stuff, and you can put in stuff like what's your cholesterol level, I think, I can't remember. But when you use those types of applications for, you know, I'm using health as an example, that stuff is not covered by HIPAA or privacy laws related to medical stuff, because HIPAA is about a patient-provider relationship. So the stuff, like when you go to the doctor, let's say you go to the doctor and your doctor gives you an app to use. So that app, because you're in a patient-provider situation, is covered by HIPAA. So it has all the HIPAA protections. When you buy a Fitbit or you do anything like that that has nothing to do with medical, that the privacy laws that apply are the consumer laws, which are much less strong than something like HIPAA for medical. So it's sort of like throwing data over a fence, sort of, and it has much lesser protection. So the more information you give out, the less protection you have, and then the least amount of protection you have is information that you volunteer about yourself. So you have no, you know, let's say you said, oh, I have this chronic condition on Facebook or something like that, they consider that no longer private. So, and so it can be used, you know, against you actually, without you even knowing, because they consider that public now. I think education is key, and being able to educate on a simple level. So I like to say, tell people like, would your grandmother understand this? If not, you may have to go back to the drawing board to be able to explain it. It needs to be explained as simply as possible. It's challenging because you're dealing with data from all types of different people, right? So you have to figure out, how can I communicate best to these audiences? So, you know, even teenagers are using cell phones, or they're, you know, on TikTok and doing stuff. They need to know about data. They need to know what they need to, what's happening when they're interacting with a device or when they're on the internet. You know, I think that education and that openness will engender more trust, you know, in AI algorithms. So, you know, and then also, you know, a lot of us, we're very diverse, right? We live in a very diverse type of world. So if we're only, you know, we're only looking at things from a homogenous point of view, you're not going to get like that richer perspective of something that could possibly improve your product, right? So being able to have people, you know, have a feedback loop where it's not just a one way thing where, okay, I developed this product, I'm going to put it out here and that's it. You know, I think you want to have a feedback loop where you can have people test it and look at it and say, hey, you know, did you think about this? You know, here's an issue that I have. So I think any type of technology like this will be iterative, and you want it to be improved as much as possible. So as much of that feedback you can get from diverse people, whether that be having diverse people helping in developing, you know, these things, being able to test, being able to work through implementation, and getting that feedback into like a roadmap for improvement would be really helpful. I think the best way to limit the costs. So the cost really, in my opinion, starts when you start getting in trouble. So you want to prevent instead of cure. So a cure is way more expensive than a prevention. So anything that you can do at the front end, I especially like to work with people on a proactive basis because that's where you can stop the problems. Because after that, if you're being reactive, the problems can snowball, become a lot bigger. So being able to kind of talk through it at the front end, and then, to me, one thing I tell people to do is like don't get so overwhelmed by the privacy laws, because not everything is going to apply to you. So let's say that, for example, you have a product in Europe or something that you want to roll out in Europe. So depending on your product, what it's doing, what it's using, not everything in the GDPR is going to apply to you. So being able to find out quickly what applies to you, I think will help people be less afraid of what they need to do, and then really keeping good documentation. So documentation is very important, because let's say if you have a data breach or something, one of the first things a regulator is going to ask you is, so what were you doing up to this point? Before you had a data breach, like, did you have a plan in place? Did you, were you thinking about this? And, a plan is not that expensive. Like, literally, if you put, on a sheet of paper, this is what we're going to do, A, B, and C, and D. That'll be better than not having anything. So being able to have a plan and have some type of, systemic thought about what you're going to do with your data. So how are you going to collect it? How are you going to, at what point or what triggers like a deletion? What are you going to do when someone calls you and asks you for your data? You need to be able to answer those questions. And I think, and I feel the same about cybersecurity. Have a plan. It doesn't have to be like a Mission Impossible level plan. It can be very simple. If we get a data breach, I'm gonna call X, or we're gonna make people change their passwords every 3 months, or we're I'm gonna make sure that the person who was promoted from accounting to vice president, their access to accounting will be terminated because they're no longer in that field. So so to me, start simple. Start with the stuff that doesn't cost a lot. Maybe it takes more time, right? Time and thought to just sketch it out at a high level, and then you kind of triage. Think about what's the most pressing thing that you want to focus on, and then try to flesh it out or put more meat on that if you can before you reach out. So an example of this is, I have companies, everyone wants software, right? They're like, oh my God, I have this problem. I want to create, get this software. It's going to solve my problem. It's like, well, you need a plan first before you try to run out and buy something. Because what I see is people buying stuff and then they say, oh, this doesn't solve my problem. And then they go out and try to buy something else. When really, we as humans need to take responsibility. We can't abdicate our responsibility to technology. So there is no easy button here. So someone actually has to put some sweat in to be able to try to get this taken care of. And then software can help you with your plan. It can't make a plan for you. Thank you so much. This was fantastic. Am I supposed to hang up now? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.